When I was 16 years old, I stopped going to church completely. I still loved God. I still had faith in God. I still had a relationship with God, but I stopped going to church. There were many reasons why I left that specific church, and I won't go into all of them. I'm not going to share the whole story, but the first and most important reason why I left that church was because the pastor had an affair. He had been pastor of that church for about a decade until he was fired for having an affair. And there were many other reasons why he was fired, and that was the one that allowed all of the other truths about him to come out. And later, after he left, it was discovered that he didn't even have any pastor experience. He didn't have any college degree in anything biblical related. But anyway, after I had left that church for about a year or so, it was just me and God. And I loved that time personally. That was the time that I was so close with God, was during that time. But then I found another church, which I really liked going to. Again, it was a smaller church, a small local church. And after a year or so of going to that church, the day that I found out that pastor had also had an affair, I got up and I walked out in the middle of service. I left because of the first reason, but I also left this time because he was prideful. This pastor, as well as the first pastor, they counseled women alone, which is not a good idea, seeing as how many pastors recently have fallen and have cheated on their wives because they have been alone with other women. And I think that's a little bit prideful to think that we are strong enough to be able to be in that kind of situation and not cheat. And also, it's not necessary. Women can counsel other women. The pastor doesn't have to counsel women alone. So pretty much he showed a lot of pride. He spoke very confidently, but it was too confidently. Like, there's a line between being confident and then being prideful. And so after 6 weeks or so, they did ask him to come back, because 6 weeks is enough to repent and fix a marriage, I guess, is what they thought. I don't know. But a while later, he ended up selling the entire church without telling anybody, because he alone had way too much power, which brings me to reason number 3. Both pastors had way too much power. They were both small churches. They were not part of a larger organization of churches or anything like that. They had the majority of the power by themselves. And of course, there was like a board of leaders, but they didn't hold the pastors accountable. They didn't know what to do in that situation. And this seems to be happening again and again in pastors that we hear about in the news. Pastors of huge churches, they have too much power, they don't have any accountability, and they end up cheating on their wives, and they end up falling. Another reason that I left that second church was because I didn't trust the pastor and I didn't trust the people at that church. Everybody was so divided after the truth came out about who these men really were. Some people wanted the pastor to return at both churches, and some people didn't. There was so much arguing and just so much division. I personally didn't want either of those people leading me. It wasn't like they just made a one-time mistake and then they're okay now. No, it was like these people were deeply, deeply flawed. I couldn't attend a church where that kind of person was my spiritual leader. I think I was like 20 years old when I left the second church, and a lot of people there criticized me and tried to convince me to stay because Their argument was that, oh, I need to forgive the pastor. I need to forgive him. And, he just made a mistake. But the issue was so much bigger than that. Like, I'm not the one who needs to give him forgiveness. And I wasn't mad at him. There were so many other reasons why I actually left. And none of them had to do with a lack of forgiveness. So after that church, I ended up visiting many, many churches. So even though I have seen many pastors fall, many men fall, I can't give up because, even statistically speaking, there must be a good church out there somewhere. There has to be one. And every church that I go to where the pastor is not humble or the pastor is too prideful, it brings me closer to finding a church where the pastor is humble. And that really is my only requirement for a pastor, is that he be humble. And sometimes that seems like too much to ask for. And even through all of that, my faith in God never changed. It's not God's fault that men choose to cheat on their wives or abuse their power. That's not God's fault. And I don't know if this is exactly an example. It's not really a comparison. If there's a teacher who abuses their power and they're fired, I'm not going to lose my faith in the entire system of education in general just because teachers are making terrible choices that hurt many people. I'm not going to lose my entire faith in this education system and just stop believing that we should educate children because of that. And so, just because pastors and Christians have hurt me in the past, I can't say that I don't believe in God anymore because of that. That doesn't make sense to me, because at the end of the day, my trust is not in them. It's in God. And God has been with me through everything. So my hope and my trust and my faith is in God. He is good. He has never let me down. But I think that Mariano and I have found a church that follows God, puts God first, and is very humble before God. And I will share that next time. So that's all. Peace out.
I'm doing fine. So ease your worried mind. Sit back and close your eyes.